At this time, I'd like to call for any public comment online or obviously not in the room if there's any. All right. So approval of the minutes is a little problematic, although I must say I happened to be in the audience with my mouth closed at the time, and I went through the minutes and they look according to everything I remember of the minutes. So I don't know how to go about that. Can I make a movement to approve the minutes? And all right, I make a movement to approve the minutes as written. All right, Jeffrey, please go ahead.
We have two items under new business. The reports on the monthly financial reports for June 2025, and also customer service update. I'm not sure if Kelly Richards will be joining us. She's out today. However, we talked about this last week, so she brought us up to speed on a number of items. So if you like, we can defer that as well. So I don't have much to add.
Yeah, Kelly is out today, and for the most part, we moved the customer service update to a regular board meeting because we felt like that was the better spot for it. So I think she's scheduled to give her next update to the full board on the 30th. She alternates months with external affairs. So for the most part, that goes to the full board. But she won't be here.
That sounds good to me, unless there's something unusual that she wants to talk to the subcommittee on. All right.
Okay. Let's move ahead with our monthly budget status report. And this is an item that for this particular report, June 30th of 2025, it is unaudited. In fact, we are still processing invoices from 24-25, and we will probably be processing some through August. So when we get closer to the actual final numbers, we'll be back to you in September for those numbers. And it's also during audit planning. We're going through that right now. So when you look at these numbers, we're generally a month behind in some of our billings just because we get billed in arrears. What I'd like to be able to do very quickly here is go over the format of the report first, and then we can dive into it. Michael will kind of scroll through. The first couple pages are revenues. We have it broken out into operating and non-operating revenues. We talked about that last week, the difference between the two. And so we'll dive into that a little bit deeper. And then next slide down, we get into expenditures. We first go over expenditures for the district in total, a roll up of all the departments. And then we scroll down and look at some of this departmental line items, mostly those that are over budget, and we talk about why. So we'll go through department by department. Department 50, which I mentioned is non-departmental. I don't know if you brought your cheat sheet with you. Remember, you said you bring it with you all the time. And so we go through all the different departments, and then we look at fund balance reports and CIP. So let's go into operating revenues. In looking at this, we are essentially at the end of June, we're supposed to be 100% of budget. Again, we still have some expenses to come through, but there'll also be some revenues that come through, specifically on the property tax, because supplementals don't come in until August, and we have some other revenues that we have to accrue once we identify them. Some of those are grant revenues that are associated with fiscal year 24-25. But when we look at the overall budget for revenues, we're at about 96% of budgeted revenues. And we'll go through some of the different line items on that. Water and sewer revenues, these are the rate revenues from billing. We're just under 98% of budget. I used the rate studies projected numbers on the budget, and then I added in some additional for revenues for new connections. Now, when you look at our water revenues, it's a combination of base rate and consumption. And that's what you try to predict is consumption, and that's the hardest thing. Base rate's easy. Consumption, you don't know how much people are going to be using for water. So the consultants, and we usually take a look at historical, and I didn't really have a whole lot of historical under the new rate structure. So I just went along with what the rate study said, and we're pretty darn close. And we did have a fairly mild winter, and we didn't have to use a whole lot. So again, consumption varies based on the time of the year and location, and obviously weather as well. So when it comes to water and sewer revenues, I'm okay with where we stand.
Let me ask this, when we have a hot, dry summer, like last summer compared to this summer so far, do we use significantly more water? Does community, do our people use considerably more water? Is that?
It depends on where you live. Remember, we talked last week about the different service areas. The largest service area is Ebbets Pass.
Right.
So when you're looking at outdoor irrigation is the one item that we look at during the summer, the hot summer months, because people tend to water their lawns and gardens. You get less of that up the pass.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas down in Rancho, in Calaveras, and down in that area, Valley Springs, also over in Copper, that's where you get more of the summertime usage. And again, it varies because with the introduction of the AMI, AMR, the automatic meter reading system, people can now see online what their usage is. And some people, especially with the rates, are making it a little bit difficult for them. They're monitoring it closer so they can monitor their usage. The customer service ladies get a lot of calls and, talking about usage on their bills. And we steer them to the website where they can go in and check in the portal, and they can see day to day, even within hours, how they're using their water. So that's kind of driving some of the usage down. But in terms of heat, we generally see more water usage in dry times. And although during drought times, we do generally see a reduction in usage. And that's because of the message we put out to the customers. Property tax revenues. And I'm basically going down the line item here on page number 1. Some of the smaller revenues, if I see a change of maybe 2,000 or 3,000, that to me is almost budget dust. I focus on the larger items and where the trends are really important when we look at our overall financial picture. So if we go down to middle of the page, property taxes, we are at just under 96% of property tax budget. However, we still have supplementals to come in, and those are due in August, and that generally represents about 4.5% of our total property tax revenues. So once they come in, we should be pretty darn close to budget. And what we use is the county's numbers, projections for creating our property tax revenue projections. On our hydropower revenues, we're coming in short. And I haven't really had a chance to dive into this much. We are currently at about 83%. North Fork is at 91%. New Hogan is at 49%. I know there's been some maintenance going on down there, and I'm going to be working with the water resources and diving in deeper as to why MID's power generations were much lower this year than previous.
Yeah, no, it must have been, if they've had some extended outages, that could be the cause of that. But it surprises me that it's that low, so we'll reach out to them.
That's interesting. We got plenty of water, so.
Yeah, it's not actually up to MID. They don't control the water releases, but based on the normal schedule of water releases for a year like this, it should have been. We'll follow through.
We're going to be operational with this.
Right.
Delinquent charges. As we talked about last week, this is something we've put into place and we're starting to see some revenues flow in this month, fiscal year 25-26. Now, if we go down towards the bottom under other revenues, rental revenue, you can see in the budget column, we budgeted 83,000, but we've only received 17,700 to date. Due to GASB requirements, GASB 87, it's during year-end close that we actually figure out what our revenues are going to be because it's deferred inflows, deferred outflows. It's a lot of accounting to figure out what you have. You can't actually just look at how much money came in. You have to go through an accounting process to see actually how much you can allocate to this fiscal year. It's a challenge.
Yes.
Sure. Cell tower leases.
And then we rent a house too, and that might have been part of the shortfall there as well, because we had tenants in the house and then they moved out, and so there was a period of vacancy there. For how much we budgeted for that.
Actually, that goes into the admin building fund, the revenues for that. Based
Doesn't
on,
it show up in that line?
no, it does
Okay,
not.
gotcha.
So
Cell phone customers. Not.
No, they are. It's just an accounting exercise. It's not finally recorded until the end of the year. It goes into a receivable, but it does not show up as a revenue right away. Because again, you have to go through this accounting process because you have to look at the entire term of the lease. You look at the costs associated, the projected revenues, and space as that are allocated to multiple years. You can then come back to this fiscal year and say, okay, I know how much I can put into revenues for 24-25.
why do we own a house that we're renting out?
We've had that house down in Jenny Lynn. It's across from the plant for many, many years. And it came when the property a long time ago. And
I think it was also part of the plant expansion where it made more sense for CCMD to buy the house. But that was long before any of us were there.
yeah,
And then complete the plant expansion, and then there's been debate over the years about what to do with the house. There's some archaeological issues there that we have to be mindful of. And so we had a discussion about it again last year because it was vacant for quite a while and it's starting to fall into disrepair. And so we had a discussion last year as to whether we fix it up and rent it or sell it. And the decision was that we would do, some the minimal repair that we needed to do. We did that actually in-house for the most part. And we got it back out of the market without tenants in there, so it's generating income again.
Very excited.
and just for geographical reference, our plant is here, the Calaveras River is here, the house is on the other side. And as the utilities guys in the past, Bill Purley and others have told me, we want to control both sides of the river because it's right within our intake area. And I know we're going to have to do some work on the intake in the future. That's why they told us it's good to have both sides on both sides of the river.
Well, it's the same size river as the treatment plant, but the backyard is probably 100 yards of river frontage.
Yeah.
Beautiful backyard. It's kind of a funky little house, but amazing backyard. Go fly fishing right out of the backyard there. And it does, if we were to do work to the intake there, we would need access to that property. So there's,
Yes.
That makes sense. then.
and so
Okay.
that is more strategic value to us, and so then we might as well try to generate some revenue from it to create another rental unit for skirmish, which not our core business, but yeah,
No.
exactly.
And finally, at the bottom, there's other non-operating revenues, and that is here. That would be on page 3. when we're talking about non-operating revenues. Remember the difference between operating and non-operating? Well, if you go down to, where are we? Let's see.
If you want, we could sit side by side. You can read this.
We could wrap it up. Other non-operating revenues, that's where and I talked about this before, those are the reimbursements we get from NCPA and MID for the dam and admin fees, the federal and state that we pay related to the power projects. And it's running behind budget. And at this point, I don't have a real good answer. I've got several files on top of my desk. So I have to go through what we bill versus if we missed anything, and I'll get back to you at the next meeting and have better information on it.
All right, but that kind of shows up on power sales mostly.
Those are, no, it doesn't show up on power sales. It's other non-operating, I'm sorry, it's the bottom of page 1. The second to last one, GL 54600. We budgeted,
Well, other non-operating
745.
revenue, yeah.
yeah,
Okay, so we're at 72% of budget.
Michael, can you print to one of the copies from there? You sure? Okay. Okay, now we go to other non-operating revenues. Expansion fees. Remember, these are the new connection fees that we pay. And we don't break them up by service area, we just roll them up. It is basically towards the middle of the page, where in 2025 to date, we've had $466,000 of capacity fees. There is a downward trend that is a little concerning, because back in 23, we had a little over 915,000. 24, we had 547,000. And that's driven by new home building and developers. Although we do on the horizon have a couple projects, especially down in the Jenny Lynn area, that could come on board in the next couple of years to boost that up. What was it, 150? for
Yeah,
LGI?
so I think the LGI Homes is about 150. We have a Jenny Lind interconnection, elementary school interconnection. I'll talk about it a little bit later. And then Gold Creek 3 is waiting for construction. That's another 140 units, I think. And
Are we going to serve Eureka Oaks in Angels Camp? Is that?
not Angels Camp? There is another potentially proposed development in Valley Springs, but it's kind of earlier in the planning process, so we're not sure exactly how many connections that's going to be and how, how soon that will come on. LGI Homes is looking to start construction, I think by the end of this year is what their revised estimate. They've been saying that for a couple of years now. Vista Del Lago, right across from the La Contenta restaurant. Yeah.
But I'm sorry, just because I'm on the Habitat board, I'm still figuring things out. So Eureka Oaks, there in Angels Camp is
City of Angels Camp
City of Angels Water.
and wastewater.
Okay. Yeah, and we don't supply them any water. It's totally out of Angels Creek or whatever. Okay, got it.
Moving on to expenses on page 4. Again, as I mentioned previously, this is a roll-up of all departments. And when I look at this, like I think I alluded to this last week, when I'm looking at the operating budget, there's salaries and benefits, services and supplies, and capital outlay. I look at the different budgets, all the numbers within those 3 categories separately. I track salaries and benefits. In services and supplies, I'll look at all the GLs, but if one GL is over and another GL is under, I don't have heartburn over it. What I do look is large differences, large variances to budgets. Things that come to mind is why. And when I'm looking at this, things that pop into mind really is in the service and supplies budget, because we're pretty good at determining what our salaries and benefits are. Service and supplies varies based on need. And a lot of our biggest costs are in utilities, because those are the guys out in the field and at the treatment plants. Under salaries and benefits, we're actually at about 80% of budget. And the question you just said, Jeff, you just said you tend to do very good on budgeting for salaries and benefits. We budget at full capacity, all the positions filled. We also have a number of vacancies, especially in the engineering department. We've struggled in the past to get engineers. It looks like we're moving ahead. So there are salary savings there. And even in the board of directors budget, I budget for maximum meetings, although you guys never get to that point. But from a fiscal perspective, I have to be conservative on how I budget my expenditures. I got to make sure they're all accounted for. So when you look at salaries and benefits, that's in that first section, Y1, you see most of them are under budget. Two of them are a little over budget. So if you look at one of those is comp time payouts. I mentioned that before. When you work overtime, you can either get overtime pay or you can ask for it as comp time, which some people do, because if I work an hour overtime, I can then use an hour and a half of comp time if I need to take some time off. But what we're seeing more and more now is some people are actually cashing out that CTO. So if you look at overtime line, we're at 81%. Yet so comp time payouts is over. But if you look at the two, we're pretty darn close to being neutral. So that's how I kind of look at things. And overtime is really hard to predict, because you can't tell when a system is going to break on a weekend and you got to bring 5-6 people out, or up the pass in the winter time in the snow. So we do our best, look at things historically, and that's how we populate those numbers.
But the CTO shows up in the financials when it's used, not as it's accumulated on the books.
It shows up as a cost. It will show up on the books, under financial statements, on the balance sheet. And that's something Michael has been working on, because GASB has a new rule regarding, and it's called compensated absences. So you have to account for that, even including as much as what FICA is going to be and some of the other costs. So it's an exhaustive exercise.
See why?
So
We also didn't have CTO payout either in that unit.
yeah,
We put into the dollars and dollars.
yeah, we roll them together back then.
But I can't, yeah, so the other, I mean, I can't think of any,
You're all together.
yeah,
That's probably makes sense.
And I don't think we had any FEMA events, those storm events back
I
then.
mean, we might have, but it wouldn't have been so that significant.
It makes sense.
Total salary and wages were much less. It could have been just fewer people therefore.
Exactly. And sometimes we do struggle with that. Again, when we're short, people have to look over. Any questions? Sorry, Michael, I interrupted.
Significant construction projects also can grab that up.
Any questions on salaries and benefits? Okay, under services and supplies, you can see on this sheet, it's broken out by kind of groups. The Y02 is utility services, which is power, utilities, water and such. Materials and supplies is Y03. And then it goes down from there. Some of the ones that I've looked at that jump out at me, and again, I look at dollar amounts because sometimes if you look at a line item that is at budget of 5,000 and it's $500 over budget, the percentages will jump out at you, but the dollar amount really isn't that significant. Some of the ones I looked at here was under materials and supplies, which is about halfway down the page, 60310. We're little under $42,000 over budget. The majority of that is in utilities. And in talking to Damon, they had some PRV parts they had to replace up in Ebbets Pass area that was quite expensive, about $7,000 there. Hydrants replacements, hydrants showed up there and related parts, hydrant meters. So there was a number of expensive components that made up that overage. But we're also, when you look at it historically, we were actually lower. I mean, we're comparable to 2024, which was 248,000.
No, when I went to these numbers, I did think, oh my God, 263% over budget. And you look at it, such a small amount, the overall budget, you're gonna get that when you go over everything. It's really the total. But I do have a question on under utility service. Why are we more than 10% down on you look at our 2025 costs for power, they're way below 2023. That's a huge difference.
So
Go ahead.
that's one of the things I was going to address later too, but that's a great question. We can cover it today. So we get our power from the Calaveras Public Power Authority, where we get a significant discount compared to the PG&E commercial rate, which is what we would normally otherwise pay. We get about half price power, which is great. The CPPA rate has fluctuated quite a bit in the last few years. And so we were basically double where we are now just 2 years ago. And then it dropped significantly. And then just this morning, we had a CPPA board meeting and that rate just jumped back up, not quite to where it was before. So it went from, I think we were at 19 or 20 cents a kilowatt hour 3 years ago. And then just this last year, it was down to 12, which is great. And then this year, it just, as of today, went back up to 18 cents.
Great, it's 61 cents.
It is a complicated formula. It's a kind of a black box based on PG&E's. So the power supply comes through CPPA. We're very lucky to have, we're one of the few counties in the state that purchases power directly from the Central Valley Project, the federal government, basically because when New Melones was built, that was part of the benefit that they had to find some local benefit. And part of the local benefit was discounted power off of the federal project. And so Tuolumne County also gets it. We get it. I think there's only one other county in the state that has access to this preferred power price.
Is it also related to the fact that we've had wet winters, therefore we've got a lot of water, or California?
Not directly. It's more related to, so part of that, what's built into that rate, because so the power supply comes through WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration, the federal government. But the poles and wires are still PG&E's, and the billing still goes through PG&E. So there's PG&E components to the bill, the distribution charges, the transmission charges, and so we still are subject to PG&E rate fluctuations, and that's what has created that big swing over those years. It was, we saw it shoot up, we saw it drop back down, we're seeing it go back up. There's still, we're involved in a dispute at FERC over PG&E's rates for these types of their wholesale distribution tariff. So we're involved in a rate proceeding at FERC to hash that out. We're hoping at the end of this year that it will, a new wholesale distribution tariff will be approved that kind of smooths it out. And so we're not, and clarifies it. So we're not subject to this formula that is very difficult to understand. It's a easier process to set that price. So, but that's the short story is that CPPA price has swung significantly. And the discussion we had this morning at the board meeting was, yes, it's going back up from 12 cents to 18, and it may have to go back up again mid-year, even January. And so the CPPA board, we try to decide, you know, if we have to make those mid-year adjustments, we will. We also have a rate stabilization fund that we will use sometimes to try to smooth that out. It's hard for public agencies to do that in the middle of the fiscal year. And so we have a rate stabilization fund to try to smooth that out at times, but then we have to rebuild that reserve. So that might mean that in the next year's rate increase is even higher than it otherwise been. So there's sometimes a trade-off for that.
That would kill for 18 cents a kilowatt.
You've got a shooting system. Is there any single location that reinvest or behind you?
We have the CPPA rate being so low is great, but one of the return on investment for a lot of those behind the meter projects is not there because of how low our power price is. And so we have looked at that at times. We even had an agreement. We've had agreements with developers at times to come out and look at that, and it's never a pencil.
School districts about house work and also public power, nothing new ones. And if there's been this fluctuation over 18 cents, or
Well, it's
starts to get up.
it's still, because you have to look at it, even if it's going up, you still have to look at it in comparison to what we otherwise would pay, which is going up even. So I think the PG&E rate is now 40 cents. Yeah. So
That's not
but
100%.
that's something we will continue to revisit. Whenever we reach that point where it pencils and it makes sense, you know, we have, we're doing an analysis right now for charging stations where we might need those. And that's going to increase our load. And so do we start to get to a point where, are there strategic locations where we can offset that power cost? Because even if it's a great rate, it's still a significant part of our budget. So if we can offset that, if we can, create our own generation, it's a cost saving for the district.
In CPA. But charge, they put a better view of the game.
So they are also a WAPA customer. In fact, I think they're WAPA's largest customer. But their sources of supply for all of their member agencies are diverse. So they have their own sources of generation. They buy power from the federal government. They buy power from other agencies as well. So they have a huge mix of different sources.
And one of the challenges we face too is that we have individual accounts with CPPA for our lift stations, our pump stations, all these different ones that are spread out throughout. So as far as trying to get solar in those individual ones, it's a little bit of a challenge, but the larger singular locations like the plants, that could be an option at some point. Yes.
Yeah.
See what you brought up there, Jeff?
It's all interesting to me.
Yeah, it is interesting stuff. And it's,
Okay. The next big line item that I wanted to address is about 3/4 of the way down, 60332, leak repair supplies. It's about $35,000 over budget, but that's because in talking to Damon, they have a lot more repairs going on this year than they anticipated. And that's driven by need. The next one down towards the bottom, 60359, pump motors and repairs. That's about 27,000 over budget. There were several unscheduled sewer pump replacements. And when they fail, you have to have it obviously fixed. Damon and his crew are looking at those and also the generators. and trying to get a better handle on where they are within their life cycle and be able to better prepare for them, because there's a cost overrun in the generator repair too. And some of those had to replace radiators, and we're not talking little radiators. These are big generators with big radiators that are very expensive to replace. Over on the top of the next page,
Again, huge shift. In how do you shift? It's huge shift.
yeah. Now, some of that too is we're doing a better job of purchasing, and they do more bulk purchasing, and we are able to store it. So throughout the year, you're going to kind of see this in chemical purchases, because, you know, they may buy 2, 3, 4 months worth of supplies at one point. And so you see those fluctuations, but overall, they've done a really good job handling their purchases.
We have water district's birthday cooperatively purchase. These are a co-op. We're about $500,000. Probably we see it.
So we looked at that before with other local water districts, and the different treatment technologies use different chemicals, or people have different preferences. And in the past, every time we looked at that, the logistics of it always outweigh the benefit. The costs, I guess, of the transaction costs always outweigh the benefits of it. Because unless you're buying exactly the same thing, roughly the same timeline, and you have that relationship, kind of that structure in place, it can be difficult to administer. And so we will continue to talk to other agencies about whether there's some benefit there. But most of the time it doesn't materialize.
Because ag buys opportunities. Most people participate in co-op buying this. Because of buying retail.
Yeah.
But I will say, well done, because clearly buying in bulk and the way you're planning is saving us over $100,000 a year based on what you spent in 2023. So
Yeah, we did see a bit of a price spike in 2023 too. So there's multiple things going on there, but in general, yes, our purchasing agent does a great job of trying to find the best way to purchase and the best deal.
Under outside services at the very bottom of that, just above vehicle and equipment, laboratory services. You can see that it's just under $55,000 over budget. In talking to Jesse Hampton, our head of the treatment plants, there are new reporting requirements that have driven this cost upwards. Let me get down here to my notes. Higher cost additional testing for PFAS, special sampling, one of them through UCMR5. EPA has created new requirements for testing, and we also have to do some monthly calcium testing. This was not anticipated when we put the budget together, but it's worked into 25-26 budget. This is all driven by regulations. Yes.
next year's budget will be bigger in this area.
Yes. If you look under vehicle and expenses, under repair parts, repair expenditure, parts and repairs, 60620, we're about $41,000 over budget. Reason for that, we had some unexpected repairs to our VACON and our backhoes, which tend to be very expensive. Further on down the line there are generator repairs. We had, and I mentioned that previously, where we had some radiators go out, which were very expensive to replace. And this is where we're being a little bit more proactive. They're creating an asset management tracking system so we can assess the condition of each of the different generators and be on the more proactive cycle to address and provide upfront maintenance.
Not permanently. there was one incident we had, so this is going back a ways now, but, I believe it was during the first PSPS event, or it was in that time frame, when we had a generator fail in one of our biggest generators failed in copper. And because it was kind of early in either the first one, or it was definitely that first season of PSPS events, there were no generators available anywhere. We had PG&E, we had Cal OES, we had everybody that we could think of. With the guy at Cal OES, I remember I was working with that day. We were kind of scrambling to figure out what we can do, because we were within 24 hours of running out of water in copper during the high fire. You know, obviously the PSPS events when it's a highest fire risk, you know. And so if a fire had occurred during that time, it would have drained our tanks very quickly. But even on normal consumption, we were less than 24 hours away from running out of water. And more than 24-hour repair time for the generator. And so we're trying to work with Cal OES. I'm getting a call back from the guy at Cal OES. He said, "I found a generator for you, trailer mounted generator. It's a 2 megawatt generator, it's like twice the size that we needed." I said, "Okay." Said it's in Texas. It'll be here next week. And so we were just ringing the alarm bell and trying to get a hold of the right people. And finally, I have to, you know, as frustrating as PG&E can be, I have to give them credit on this day. Got a hold of somebody in their emergency operations center. And the first thing the guy said to me was, "I don't know what your issue is, but if you got through to me, you need help, just tell me what you need." And I said, "Here's exactly what we need." And he said, "We'll have it there." And I think 4 hours later, they had a generator out here from the Bay Area with a team to connect it to our facility. And they ran it for, I think it was close to a week. They refueled it. They took care of everything. We never got a bill for it. And then back online, they came and picked it up. And yeah, so I think it was after that Calvert, so yes, was in, yeah, I think they now have some trailer mounted generators. Right. This was, I think this was one of the events that led to that. Yeah, so, but no, other than that, PG&E hasn't provided us on a regular basis with a generator. Yeah, and we've kind of gradually upgraded our fleet over time too. We have a grant that we applied for. I think it was that same year. And it takes a long time sometimes for these FEMA grants to work their way through the funding. But it looks like we're very close to actually funding that grant now, where we're going to be able to upgrade our generator fleet even more.
Director Baramendi, can you please turn your microphone on?
Yes.
Thank you.
Forgot.
That's okay. I do that myself too. The next item that has a large overage is retiree health. What we do is for people who have retired and meet certain certification or certain milestones and guidelines, we pay for reimbursing them for their monthly medical insurance. We go through CalPERS for medical insurance. And when you're a retiree out of CalPERS, the CalPERS reduces your monthly retirement pay by the amount that they pay for your medical insurance. The district reimburses the retirees that amount. So we pay that as we go through. We had medical insurance costs went up higher than anticipated because what we have is when we prepare our budget, let's say for this year, for 25, 26, we know what the rates are going to be for the end of this year. We don't know what the rates are going to be starting January 1, 2026. We estimate. We were a little under that for estimating this for this particular line item. But when you have more people retire, that adds more people onto your list and then also raises the prices. But we do have what we call is OPEB, other post-employment benefits. We have a trust fund that we've built up a significant amount of money. So at some point, we haven't drawn off it, but at some point, we're going to become cost neutral. And I believe we talked about this last week, that we have a bifurcated system. We have the classic system, and for new people, new hires, it's more of a retiree health savings account. The last item I have here for under regular service and supplies, it's third-party payment processing. It's in about the middle of page number 6, the second to last item above director costs. This is the fees we pay through Tyler and for cost for the usage of credit card fees. And we talked about this last time. Our costs have gone up through Tyler. And so we do have a challenge there. But we used to be able to recover a little over 80% of our fees. Right now, we're at 58. Kelly's looking into other options to help maybe drive down those costs so that we don't have to absorb as much of it. But we're hesitant on adjusting our fees that we charge our customers. It's an aggregate amount of about 3.9% of the total cost of the charge that they put on the credit card.
Yeah, that's amazing that third-party processing has essentially doubled in 2 years. It's,
Now, part of that is people are using it more, but the other part is the pass-through fees have gone up. Especially, it started in February of this year. They really almost started doubling, going up 50%.
you'll watch that space.
So there are options, and we're looking at those.
Yeah.
Because we're very mindful of not passing on any significant more fees to the customers. So we want to look at what our options are of driving down our costs before we go down that path of having to revisit the percentage we charge.
We offer, I mean, obviously it's part of Kelly's presentation on customer service, but we offer ACH, I assume, or bank checks or e-checks, whatever. So there's
Multiple ways to pay. And customer service is great on when people call up to educating them on their options to provide them the lowest cost option. Of course, the lowest cost is for them to write a check and mail it to us on the customer side.
Right.
Capital outlay, which is over on page 7, towards the very bottom. Michael brought up the fact that we're trying to get money from FEMA to be able to replace some of our generators. They were looking at a 75% contribution from FEMA, 25% local match. This has been in the budget for several years. It's not going to happen, obviously, in 24, 25. We're hoping 25, 26, but we don't know what's coming out of DC with potential cuts.
I mean, that's a big thing for CCWD on grants in general, especially FEMA grants. We just don't know.
Yeah.
so that 661 that just keeps carrying forward.
We will carry forward. Well, we didn't include it in the 25, 26 budget because there's still question marks. When we get final notification from FEMA that we're getting the grant, we sign the paperwork on the dotted line, we'll come back to the board to get a budget adjustment.
That fund is, that 661 is currently in the capital outlay fund.
Yes. We also have a project, the Dow's Fuel Break Project, and that was budgeted in capital outlay last year, but there was some delays in getting it up and running. So we didn't expend as much money as we anticipated. I did sign off on some charges recently on that, the invoice that's going out today. But we put the money into next year's budget, but it's a wash because it's 100% grant fund. So I'm not worried about this being under budget because it's basically a net zero.
Your East Coast just came out. Worse.
I heard it.
You heard it too.
It's great.
Okay. There are more items, and we can go by department if you'd like, but I kind of covered the high points here.
And I just add briefly at a high level, you know, when I look at kind of the cumulative totals, you know, in a perfect world, we're budgeting conservatively when it comes to revenue. And so we're a little higher at the end of the year than what we budgeted for. This year we came in a little lower, but Jeff explained why that is. We're pretty close, but we want to look at that. I think looking at, because to me, when I see how, you know, where we are in terms of expenditures, there's, you know, it's great if that's cost savings and efficiency, but my question is, when you're that far, what work didn't get done that we budgeted for? And a huge part of it was the amount of staff turnover that we've had and vacancies that we've carried that we're filling. But there was also, I think, one of the results of that is you look at outside services. We came in, you know, well under in outside services too, and that's partly because there's enough staff to manage the other work that we were going to do. So projects that got delayed, leaving the staff in-house to manage the consultant that we were going to hire to do the project that we needed to do. And so there's just stuff there's work that doesn't get done. And so that's where the concern for me comes in, is the budget is our work plan. And so if it's, we're coming in low because we found ways to save costs, or we didn't need to do projects and we got more efficient or whatever it is, then we're all for that. We're always looking for those cost saving opportunities. But if it's because work didn't get done, that's where I get concerned. So it's a balance there.
I guess the only question, I mean, look, talking 30, 40, $50,000 as on a line item for remaining balance. And, but we're looking at 126,000 on miscellaneous operating expenses. What is, can you just say a little bit about that? I mean, we're almost, you know, we're more 130, we're at 138%. That's a fairly big chunk. I'm not worried. I'm just curious out of, we're talking about Y13, or up from the very bottom.
Miscellaneous operating expense.
Yeah.
We're under.
We're at 138% of budget.
What line, what page are you on sharing?
Is that? It's under operating account expense summary account type.
Overall, in
Oh,
under Y13, but under that line.
yes, yeah.
Up and three.
No, that's our Aqua JKIA, and that's my fault. I missed that one. And that's on me, because I didn't see some trends where the insurance was going up.
Okay.
And we also got increases post-budget.
Okay.
And we've adjusted for that in this year's, but we may be short again because we don't have all the costs until the budget is been complete.
So that's our property insurance, liability insurance.
Yeah, liability work and such.
Okay.
Professional services, is that what we were just talking about?
Yes, and that's why I wanted to bring this up and follow up with what Michael just said. If you look at this is engineering. And as we talked about previously, is that we've been difficult in getting engineers. Plus, we lost our former district engineer left. And so we've been short. And there's a number of projects that engineering was supposed to do under professional services. There are master plan updates. There are surveys of Ebbets Pass.
Ebbets Pass is the master plan that got held up for a couple of different reasons. But yeah, there were several different engineering services and planning efforts that were stalled because we were short.
Yeah.
3 engineers at various points throughout the year. So we just hired one a few months ago, and he comes with experience, so getting up to speed very quickly. And then we just hired another one who is going to start in a few weeks with Oak, who also comes with a lot of experience. still takes them a lot of time to get fully up to speed, but that'll be the first time we're fully staffed in engineering.
These are all civil, right? Civil engineers.
Yeah.
So then we're gonna get to spend that 625.
That was last year's budget. And part of that sewer ordinance was one of the projects we were looking at, a number of projects that they just didn't have time to get to. Some of those were rolled over into 25, 26. But that's a true indication of we weren't able to get the work done that we planned to do because we didn't have enough staff. And that's an alarming. But we're taking, engineers are one of the hardest jobs to fill, positions to fill in this industry. I was talking to Carl Brustad, Peterson Brustad, and even in the private industry, he was saying he's struggling to get engineers to work, to fill his positions. And they've gone directly almost to colleges, universities, pick out the best and brightest and train them because they need bodies. I think we're fortunate. We've got some good engineers. Any more questions on the operating budget? Okay. If you can scroll down to the fund balance report. Please. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but this is where we look at cash in the bank for our different funds. And remember that spreadsheet I gave you last week, identifying all the different funds. And one of the ones I really want to point out that I feel very good about is if you scroll down here and look at Fund 500. Remember, Fund 500 is a sewer operating. And historically, we've been negative on that. But in the beginning of, at the end of last fiscal year, June 30th, 24, we were negative $941,000. And that's the lowest negative number we've had in years. Right now, we're at negative 500,000. So it's been a $400,000 improvement, which is very good news. And what that helps us with is, as we're looking at this year, I think I mentioned this before, the first 3 years of the rate increase was set to help our operating budgets because they're both in deficit spending. And this was a real big plus to us. And by the end of me seeing this number makes me even more confident at the end of 25, 26, we'll have enough money in that sewer operating fund to be positive and also build towards our $500,000 minimum reserve, which we talked about last year.
Yeah.
So this is really good news.
We pay back the water fund.
And that's going to be paid off this year as well, the remaining balance of it. The other items where you see the expansion funds, remember, those are the restricted funds. And the assessment districts where we're just the administrator. Next page. This is kind of our fund activity report. So when we look at it as of 6/30 of 25, revenue, you can see both rent on the water and sewer side. We have a positive net fund activity, which did not happen again in sewer. This is a plus to us. So it shows me that what we identified in the rate study, even when we reduced the proposed rates to help build up the funds, and also it's more on the capital projects, we had to scale back. We're still doing well. We're not out of the woods, because one of the things too within the rate study was to build our reserve levels to meet our minimums. And so there's work that still needs to be done, but we're moving in the right direction. And the biggest challenge is we have about 5,400 sewer customers and over 13,000 water customers. Sewer is just expensive to operate. We just don't have the customer base to spread out those costs.
These new developments down in Valley Springs, they're sewer and water, right?
Yes. So that'll help. I'm not sure how much you want to dive into the CIP. But this is an ongoing process. These are not the final numbers. We will have more better numbers probably in September once we close out projects, because again, we're running in arrears. And we're trying to, what we try to do is, and it's sometimes a challenge. Contractors need to make sure when they invoice us that they don't provide an invoice that goes over the fiscal years. It's got to be as of June 30th. Sometimes we have to kick those back.
And I think it will still, I expect those numbers to come up a little bit. We'll still be short for of what we budgeted for, which is not unusual in CIP. I think the two big drivers of that this year were we had hoped to get Arnold wastewater. So we're funding our Arnold wastewater improvement project with a USDA loan that we had hoped would have been completed, much earlier in the year, and the contractor on board by now, and starting to spend significant funds towards that in the last fiscal year, and that didn't happen. We're still waiting to close out that process. We're hoping we haven't got out the bid yet. We're hoping to have that to bid this fall.
Is that a reimbursement grant or is it
A
come?
reimbursement grant, so there's an interim financing cost associated with that, unfortunately. But they're generally very good interest rates for a project like a big treatment plant project. It's a very good source of funding.
Yeah, some sort of, we've got a crazy world going on. And reimbursement grants, the federal government should make us all nervous at this time.
That's a loan program, but yeah, it's still, yes.
Guaranteed.
Understood. Yeah. And then on the water side, I think, there were delays both in the Janeland A to B project that is now well underway, but it started a little bit later than we had anticipated. And then the Copper Cove transmission line project that is now we have now awarded that contract and the work has started, but we had also anticipated that starting last fiscal year as well, starting to incur those costs last fiscal year as well. So it's work that is still being done. It's just taking a little longer than we had hoped.
Well, I don't know if
We have to be
lines are-
careful about, because that's not all that unusual with construction projects, none of those things. But if they do go as planned, we have to have the money in the budget to be able to do them. So the CIP is a challenge to budget, and we always end up budgeting more than what we end up spending. But it's because we have a plan in place that we'd like to get those funds out to build those projects built, and then we deal with delays as they come.
Along those lines, what we were just talking about relative to grants for completing any of these projects, are any of them contingent on grants have not been approved?
Good question. No, we don't assume grants in our financial planning. And so there are projects that were taken out of the CIP that were deferred essentially, that we still feel, are important projects that we'd like to get done. And so we're always looking for grant funds for any of these projects, because that could, if we fund these projects with grants, it frees up resources to implement other projects, or you can fund the other projects with grant funds. But we don't, in terms of projects that we are actually budgeting for, we don't assume grants that unless they've actually been awarded.
Got it. Good.
We got, and Kelly G is our grant searcher. So who's been,
It's a team effort. It's usually more in the engineering department, has historically been in the lead on that. We do have a grant consultant that compiles some familiarity with our CIP and compiles a list of potential available sources of funds. So we make sure we're not missing anything, but we're pretty familiar with the different agencies that provide funding for infrastructure. And we go back to those sources as much as we can, because we know, if we have a project that looks like is a good candidate for, FEMA, hazard mitigation funding, or for SRF funding through the water board, or for USDA funding, we try to match up our projects with those different sources of funding.
When we look at loans, like the one we got the one with sewer, it was a $10 million loan. All the paperwork's been signed. It's just a matter of getting going through the process, because USDA has to sign that and everything, every step of it, right? They changed the guidelines. It used to be they would pay us on a quarterly basis. We'd submit our charges that we have paid, and then they would reimburse us for that and add it to the loan. They no longer do that. So what you have to do is take out interim financing. And we're going to do that this summer, once we're hoping the rates stabilize a little bit more, but we haven't needed it because I don't want to take on any more money until we actually need it for that. But they also reimburse us for any interim financing costs. Basically, we're taking out an interest only through a local bank for about 3 years. Once the project is complete, they come in and inspect it, we submit everything, then they will go ahead and reimburse us the entire amount, and then that becomes a loan. There's no grant component within this particular loan. Grant money through USDA last year was really tough to get a hold of. Now, the other thing that Michael was talking about is, no, we do not do any work on a project unless it's signed on the bottom. But a lot of we do a lot more work through the state agencies. We have one down to the Bummerville regulator dam down in West Point. We have signed agreement for X amount of dollars, which are doing the drilling, the engineering work up front. And then once we get to that point, where if they give us more money, then we can actually go through the construction phase. But we don't expend any money on any grants without first coming to the board and asking and showing to you that, yes, we have the local match, or yes, we have the cash in the bank to fund this until we get reimbursed. And then your board authorizes us to move forward. And that's a big component that we put in place so that there's complete transparency.
There's on UMRA, there's new Blue Mountain or Blue Forest bond, basically serving as a factoring company. We don't have any access to anything like that. Help us on the interim financing step. I've never seen a program like that before. It was interesting.
I don't know if do they fund infrastructure projects, or is it?
I
more
doubt it.
forest
I didn't know if
management?
there was something, I'm new to this business, if there was a similar.
We've met with them in the past. My understanding was it was to fund sort of forest management, watershed health
For sure.
type projects, which we fully support and we coordinate with UMRA on, but we have to be very careful about what we use our borrowing capability for. And so if we're gonna use our debt coverage capacity, we're gonna use it for infrastructure, for water, wastewater infrastructure,
Right.
and chase grants for forest management.
Totally. Just didn't know in this business.
But yeah, it's interesting because they
counterpart
do
to that.
have an interesting business model, and if they are funding water and wastewater infrastructure, I'm all ears. If we would have to use some of our borrowing capacity for a forest management project, that's probably not something we're gonna.
Any more questions on this? And there's no quiz afterwards.
Thank God.
Okay, we'll skip the next item because I don't believe Kelly's on that mission. Okay, and then she'll talk about that at the next board meeting. I was just kind of recapping some of the things that she talked about last week. The next item is Director of Admin Services comments.
Mhm.
If I can move forward with that, if you'd like.
Please.
Couple things. Today, we moved $16.5 million of the Capital One loan proceeds that we got last week. We moved it over to Chandler Asset Management. They handle our investments. Michael facilitated that transfer today. And just as an FYI, we cannot move large sums of money unless I sign off and Michael signs off on it. So we know, we create an audit trail that we know everything works. We double check all the wiring instructions and everything else. And I went over those wiring instructions 3 or 4 times to make sure everything was correct. And then we document that process. Now, one of the things that we do is, and I'm working with Chandler, is that we don't need that $16.5 million right away. So Kevin Williams, our district engineer, I worked with him and he laid out a cash flow analysis for the 3 projects that we're going to be funding over the next 3 years. And we provided that to Chandler, so they can say, okay, I don't need $5 million until X time frame. So I can go out a little longer in our investments as long as it stays within our policies, because they have to follow our investment policy. And what we're doing internally is we are revisiting that schedule every quarter. So we can update them and so they can maximize our earnings while we park the money. And one project that Michael signed off on the contract was down in Copper. And this is what's going to help fund, I think it was a BC.
Yeah, so that's the one that we've already awarded the construction contract because we want to spend this money as quickly as possible. Once we borrow, we want to get it in the ground. And so one of those projects, in fact, we were holding the project up until we got this across the finish line and the contractor was chomping at the bit. They're already buying the pipe and spending money and they're moving forward quickly. The other two projects are a little bit further behind, but we're still working through the process to get those done as quickly as possible now. So, but to Jeff's point, part of what Jeff does is to decrease the carrying cost of those funds as much as possible while we are carrying. So if we can generate enough, interest off of those funds to cover our interest payments, and then we're not spending money to hold money.
So the investment funds that we're moving to are primarily interest-based? The bonds or the
A multitude of different products.
Yeah, but very conservative. We're not, risk. We're very risk averse in our investment strategy.
no VC money out there, yeah.
But we try to, get as close as we can to the interest that we have to pay.
Makes sense.
Gave me us law enforcement. 7% today.
If you'd like, we can go over the investment policy in the meeting if you're so inclined, so you can see what we do or
Might make sense at some point. but-
I think
Yeah.
reserve policy and investment policy are two things that are just really critical components of the district's
Yeah.
financial picture. And so I think it does make sense to kind of do an overview of those things.
Yes.
No, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd like that at some point, yeah.
The audit is ongoing. We have new auditors for this year. And it actually has turned out better than I anticipated. Our only hitch, so to speak, is one of our accountants is out on maternity leave. So it falls to Michael and myself, mostly Michael. And so there's a lot of work that we do internally to try to get things moving along. Because anytime new auditors come into play, you have to educate them. And we get educated in their process. So one of the things they've done is they've got a whole list of AP items that we have to go through. And I'm going through line item by line item. You have an RFP for this. So sometimes you got to dig back 4 or 5 years to get those documents to prove to them that you have it. So I'm going through all that research now. And it's a lot of work up front, but moving forward in future years, it's going to be much less work.
I know this was in the bid that the contractor put together, but the grand jury did come back saying, controls. So they could poke that out.
Yes.
That's always good for responding to both the grand jury and the board. I know we discussed that, but
Yes.
since we're on the record and on tape.
And I'll be giving a update every month on the audit as we move forward. But I think all in all, it's going to take a little longer because there's fewer of us. Kylie's not coming back full time in the office until November. So that makes it a little bit of a challenge, and she'll be working at home, but not full time. She'll have limited hours. Then I have a couple future items that I think should, and I don't want to take words out of your mouth for future items, but we want to take a look at our travel policy and our per diems, which hasn't been updated since I got here in 2008. So those are the things we're looking at. We have both an employee and a board travel policy. They're usually done in unison. And then we also want to take a look at accessory dwelling units, ADUs, our policy on.
Oh, sorry, and that relates to connections and fees, is it? What, the ADU policy?
Yeah, so it's what we charge for a second connection, and that will probably go to the engineering committee
Yeah.
first, I
Yes.
imagine, and then so, which will, looking, I think September. So maybe the September finance committee meeting. Because our policy is out of date. The state has updated its laws on the subject faster than we have updated our policy. And we know that, we know there's an inconsistency there and we have to follow state law. But we'd like to get our policy updated, but it is the tip of an iceberg. It is actually an interesting policy and engineering discussion.
Just, I mean, we'll get into this in great detail, I'm sure, but just for my edification, does Canada require a separate water hookup for ADU or can they go off the same house?
It depends on the size of the ADU.
1,200 square feet?
Yeah, so I think it's
Is that the-
definitely if you're over 1,200 square feet, I think there might be like a sliding scale below that to a certain point. Our policies, I think it was 700, which is lower than what the state requirement is, because this, yeah, so we have to.
I know the county's off the shelf ADUs go up to 1,200 square feet and then all kinds of different things happen after that.
Right.
Sprinklers, good stuff.
Yeah, the state is incentivizing that. They want to see higher density, and so it constrains water. And, they pass laws to make it harder for water and sewer agencies to add cost to adding additional units, which I understand that the policy would incentivize density, but the impact that can have on water and wastewater agencies, if you're not collecting capacity fee, you're adding capacity without collecting capacity fees, is the challenge.
Just usage, we don't have to use it then, sewer, you know. And then, sorry, back to the per diem, you want to bring that to the committee and then we'll take it to the board.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
We're working on it internally and
Yeah.
once we have it all hashed out, we bring it to your finance committee for discussion.
You'll give us a list of comparators, kind of.
Yes. And that's all I have.
Okay,
And then let's add the investment policy and reserve policies to that.
Oh, yes.
And
we don't have to do that all at once. But I'm seriously interested in all of labor.
yeah. No, we'll manage it. And that was kind of thinking more about, you were asking about who the chair is. It may be helpful to, if one person wants to be the chair, because those are the kinds of questions we would normally call me or Jeff would call the chair and say, hey, here's the list. Is this too much for one agenda? Is this, do you want to prioritize one thing or the other and push one thing to the next month? So that's part of the function of the chair, is to help if we have questions about setting the agenda.
Jeff, I'm vice chair and I'll be chair next year. So you want to take on chair this? Nominate you?
I think the way that Jeff Davidson has done is he's appointing you chair of finance and I'm fine the way I'm fine to go one split. We already discovered we work well together. So, but yeah, I'm fine to take it. I'm fine to.
Leave it to Jeff and
Okay.
my recommendation would be
Okay. I accept.
We'll see if you keep working well together now that you're in a position of authority. Sometimes that changes.
and I've always had authority.
Did a leadership thing about informal authority
Right.
and how often that is much more important than formal authority.
I agree.
Yes. However, all that being said, I would like for you guys to stick around and do this for a while, because I was very impressed with our discussion last week and grasp of what we talked about in the district finances. So I think the two of you together will help us move forward.
Well, for the record, I really appreciated that time they put in with us. That was great. Probably going to have to do that a couple times again.
That's why there is so much to know here.
Yeah.
Trust me.
And Michael, I got to say, Jeff and Kelly worked really hard to put the perfect presentation for where I was. I think it's good for you two, and then the openness of the back and forth discussion. Really for hours going. That was,
Almost 3 hours.
yeah.
It
It was,
felt like it was 5 minutes. To us, to me.
oh God, I'm back in graduate school. That's good. All right, well, thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Or Mr. Meyer. And could we have our general manager comments now, please?
So I was gonna mention the CPPA rate adjustment. We already covered that. A little bit more information on the Jenny Lind Elementary School project, in addition to the developer projects. We actually just had a meeting with them this morning as well. That one is been in the works since before my time here. And we've been working on it. And it, and it ebbs and flows as these things tend to, especially, so this is a 100% grant funded project from the State Water Board. Jenny Lind Elementary School, this is Colorado Unified, to their credit, went out and got a 100% grant. They have a wastewater treatment plant at the elementary school. And so they have to maintain that plant. They have to pay an operator to operate that plant, and they don't want to be sued. And so they went to the water board, they got a grant, they have an MOU with us, that if they can provide the infrastructure and connect to our system, we would take over the operation. And so it's a pretty significant project. It's a pipeline in Jenny Lind, I think it's about 3 miles. There'll be, instead of the sewer plant at the elementary school, there'll be a pump station. And that'll connect to the interim pump station, the intermediate pump station, and then that'll connect to the new, actually to the well. Which is beneficial for us, for this project. And then it'll create the possibilities of properties along that alignment that have not been buildable in the past because they don't park and connection sewer. And so it'll create the possibility for new sewer connections in water. So a great project, as long as it's grant funded, because the school district doesn't have any money for it. We don't have funds set aside for that project, so the state has to cover 100% of the cost of the project. And they finally got it to a point where they put it out to bid. We're used to dealing with SRF, the state revolving fund is the source of funds that the water board manages. And we've funded projects through that many times before. We're not used to being in this role where they're the applicant and we're sort of the receiving agency but we have to be involved in the construction management and inspection of the project, because it's something that we're going to own and operate for the rest of the time. And so,
Including the pump station and.
yeah, so we're
School.
working out a new agreement where we make sure we have our role, appropriate role in royalized, and that cost is covered by the grant. And the school district is working with us. So,
Then there's ongoing usage fees for the sewage.
so yeah, then they will pay based on, and they'll pay capacity into our system, and they'll pay the rate for, say, it's the equivalent of 40 sewer connections, something like that.
Are they going to decommission the current ponds?
Yes.
Anything in their value to us?
Good question. Think you could repurpose it? I don't know.
I mean, if they're
The
Demoing it.
one of the things we learned is, so we're used to dealing with SRF. We're not used to dealing with the state architect who has a role, anything that happens on school district property. And that has slowed this down considerably. They have a lot of authority over anything that happens on school property. So they may already have a plan for remediation of the existing facility. I'm not, that's a good question.
It's too bad we couldn't have done that Toyota.
They did do that for them.
I don't know, but I mean, connect.
Oh,
to the
connect, no,
system.
no, yes, they just replaced the,
Right.
yeah, right. No, I think they were too far away at that point. From us, maybe they could have connected to, VSPD, but that's still.
The sequel would just
Yeah, then down the highway, yeah, that would have been a tough one. So, they'll still have one plant, but it's a new plant. It's good. They got the grant to fund that project as well. So that'll be, the reason I bring it up now, that's a project that's been in the works for a long time. Finally got it out to bid, but we need to update our agreement. And what we just found out this morning is we need to do that in pretty short order. So we're working on that with the school district right now, and maybe before, not at the July 30th meeting, but the first or second meeting in August.
They didn't want to use us. They have their own PC. They didn't want to use us.
So we talked about that. The water board has kind of its requirements for who's doing the construction management. We proposed, why don't you just put us in that role? And because we're gonna be there anyways. And so we don't want this to be redundant, and we want to make sure it's something that the water board will fund. But I think we've come up with a structure where their engineering consultant will still be in the lead on, technically in the lead in construction management and liaison with the state, but we're kind of incorporate it into that team.
Certain things
Yeah, that should work.
should will work.
Yeah, it will work. It will work.
Thanks.
Other than that, I think Jeff's his team did a great job and teed up we have some items coming. Normally we'll have more than just the financial reports in the finance committee meeting. We'll talk about whether it's a policy we're updating or something else that's going on. So we'll stack these agendas a little bit more in the future.
Do you have any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
And then for future agenda items, any?
I think we got some things we're going to hear about
Okay,
customer service and policy. Those are all important ones.
We will probably inundate you in about another 2 or 3 meetings once we get our feet wet and our understanding.
You guarantee what we don't know.
This is a really good start. And it's funny coming in, I'll just say that coming in on the board, the one committee I didn't want to get on is finance, having served on a finance committee that was just painful. Having someone like you, in your position with your communication skills and technical skills makes the job both easier and interesting. So. All right, we have nobody online. We have no further public comment, I take it. Our next committee meeting is set for Wednesday, August 20th at 1 p.m. That works for you? All right. Any last minute comments for anyone? You okay with adjournment? Meeting adjourned. All right.